So, what is the end of the Chinese EV industry? For years, it felt like an unstoppable force, right? A tidal wave of innovation that was just going to take over the world. But now, all we hear about are price wars, too many factories, and the rest of the world pushing back. It's a bit of a paradox. So in this explainer, we're going to get into what is really going on.
Okay, first things first. When we say the end, let's be super clear. We are not talking about some sudden, dramatic collapse. This isn't a Hollywood movie. It's more like a slow, complicated rewiring of the entire system, a long-term shift that will completely reshape the industry. So let's dive into what's actually causing this tectonic shift.
You know, to really understand where this is all going, we've got to rewind the clock a little. How on earth did China build this EV juggernaut and so incredibly fast? The story of its insane rise is absolutely key to seeing the cracks that are starting to show today.
I mean, just look at this timeline. This was not an accident, not even close. This was a deliberate, state-driven mission. It kicked off back in the 2010s, making EVs a top national priority. Then, boom, the mid-2010s hit and a fire hose of subsidies was unleashed. By the time 2023 rolled around, the result was undeniable. China was the king of the EV world.
So what was this secret sauce? Well, it was a pretty potent cocktail. You had a ton of government money pouring in, which let companies build out this incredibly efficient supply chain. I'm talking they controlled the whole shebang, from the minerals in the battery to the car rolling off the line. But here's the crucial part. It also created a brutal, hyper-competitive market at home. Companies like BYD and NIO had to innovate like crazy just to survive, which ended up creating these amazing, affordable cars that were perfect for selling overseas.
But you know how these stories go. Every rocket ship story eventually has a turning point. And for China's EV empire, well, the cracks in that shiny facade are becoming pretty much impossible to ignore. That momentum that seemed totally unstoppable, it's now hitting some very, very serious turbulence.
And what's really fascinating here is that the industry is being squeezed from both sides at once. It's like it's caught in a vice. On one side, you have all these problems brewing at home. Too many factories, cutthroat price wars. And on the other side, the rest of the world is starting to put up walls with tariffs and a whole lot of political resistance.
Let's just zoom in on those internal headaches for a second. The biggest piece of this ugly pie, a massive 40% of the problem, is overcapacity. They just built too many factories too fast. And what happens when you have way too many cars sitting around? You guessed it, you get the next biggest problem. These absolutely brutal price wars. Profits get crushed, and that makes it really hard to invest in what's next.
All right, now for the storm clouds gathering outside of China, which are just as threatening. You've got Europe and the US basically putting up shields, everything from tariffs to national security flags. But listen, it's not just about the money. We're seeing all these new hurdles around data privacy, safety standards, you name it. The big takeaway here, the old strategy of just being the cheapest option on the market is starting to fail.
And this quote? It absolutely nails it. This isn't just some boring trade dispute over a few percentage points. It's a huge political signal. It's the rest of the world saying, whoa, hold on, we're not so comfortable with one country dominating the future of transportation. And that message is forcing everyone to rethink where our cars are actually going to be made.
So with all this pressure coming from every direction, how does this so-called end actually play out? Well, it's not going to be a single event. Think of it more as a process, one that's likely to unfold in 3 distinct phases.
Let's walk through this, step by step. It all kicks off with Phase 1, which is a big shakeup inside China. Then it moves to Phase 2, where companies are kind of forced to move their operations around the globe. And it all leads up to Phase 3, which is a high-stakes, all-out technology race. Let's break each of those down.
Phase 1 is already well underway. You can think of it as survival of the fittest, EV edition. Remember all those hundreds of companies that jumped into the market? Well, the brutal price wars and disappearing subsidies are acting like a filter. Only the strongest, most profitable, and most innovative companies are going to make it through to the other side.
Next up is Phase 2, and this is a real strategic puzzle. To get around that growing wall of tariffs, Chinese brands have to start doing the one thing their entire model was built to avoid: building factories outside of China. This whole de-Chinification thing might be necessary for survival, but it comes at a massive price. It basically shatters their superpower, that all-in-one, hyper-efficient supply chain they built back home.
And this brings us to the final and maybe the most critical phase, the technology war. Let's be real, China's edge was never just about being cheap. It was about being ahead of the curve in battery technology and in-car software.
Now they're in a sprint. If their rivals catch up while they're stuck in price wars and can't fund R&D, they lose their trump card. Everything really hinges on staying ahead of the pack.
Now, it is so important to remember that this shakeup won't sink everybody. Not at all. It's going to create a world of winners and losers. You've got these giants like BYD who are actually thriving in all this chaos because they have the sheer scale and the tech to weather the storm. So the future isn't a graveyard for Chinese EVs, it's more like a kingdom that's going to be ruled by a few very powerful champions.
So you can imagine this whole situation puts the Chinese government, the very architect of this industry's rise, in a really, really tough spot. They created this giant, and now they have to figure out how to guide it through a pretty painful transformation. And let me tell you, there are no easy answers here.
This table really lays out the pickle they're in. Look at option 1. Just throw more money at the problem. Sure, it might save some jobs in the short term, but it makes the root problem of overcapacity even worse. Then there's option 2. Painful structural reform. It's the healthy choice for the long run, but it could lead to massive unemployment and social unrest. And option 3, pushing companies to build overseas. It dodges the tariffs, but it means losing control and jobs at home. See? Every single path is loaded with risk.
Okay, so let's try and pull all this together. We've seen the incredible rise, the deep cracks forming, and the tough choices that lie ahead. So what's the final takeaway? What does the future actually hold for China's EV empire?
The most likely outcome here isn't oblivion. It's not going to just disappear. It's going to be a fierce selection and reorganization. The Wild West days of just explosive, unchecked growth are over. But an industry this huge, with this much investment and infrastructure, doesn't just vanish into thin air.
Ultimately, the future could split into one of two paths, and the deciding vote belongs to the government. On one hand, you have a managed consolidation, where Beijing carefully guides the industry, weeding out the weaker players and backing high-tech champions. But the other path is a chaotic collapse. If the policy is weak or misguided, you could see failures across the board, sparking major economic problems. The stakes really could not be higher.
So what we're witnessing isn't really the end of China's EV industry. It's more like the end of Chapter 1 and the beginning of a new, much more uncertain and frankly, more interesting chapter. Which leads us to the biggest question of all. As this massive industry transforms, how will its struggles and its survivors end up redrawing the entire power map of the global auto industry? That right there is the story to watch.